Hello! Welcome back to the Aquarius Samples introductory video series. I'm Alistair Foreman and I'm here again with Max Budendijk, the product manager for the product. Today again we'd like to show you some of the features of Aquarius Samples and how it can help you be productive and successful. Today we're going to look at how the system can reference data about biological information, habitat and biological data, and how it can be managed through a web software application like Aquarius Samples. Max, can you take us through an example of this type?
Sure, let's get into it. I know we've got some of this data in here, but let's just pretend I completely forgot where it is. So let's go ask the system. Let's start with observations again. And in this case, maybe I remember I had some habitat assessments. I don't know where they are, but what I do remember is that they were about white oak. So let's go ask the system and type that into our free text search right here. White oak, there we go, and we found us a whole bunch of habitat observations. Okay, I'm just going to go ahead and select one of those. This one says aquatic vegetation. If I click on this, as we're already used to, I'm just going to fold those filters away. Here we can see related information about where this data is coming from, the location, the visit. So I'm going to jump to the visit that produced this habitat assessment, and now here you can see within my field service for this field visit, I can see my habitat stream assessment. So I'm going to open this one. Here I can see lots of details about the related fieldwork part, very similar to the sampling fieldwork we saw before. And now here's details about the actual habitat assessment, such as the aquatic vegetation, riparian vegetation. There's watershed features, in-stream features. So all my data about my habitat assessment is right there available. I'm going to leave it at an overview for this example for time constraints, and we'll drill into all the different metadata for the next example in just a minute. What I do want to show though is related to white oak. There's a lot more information in the system about this called a taxonomy element or the species. I could navigate there either by opening the settings sections, and within here I have my whole taxonomy, which is fully configurable to the needs of your organization, or I could just be lazy, select my observation here right again, and I can see it's linked to my taxonomy element. So I'm going to use this link to jump to the taxonomy element. So what we can find in here is really the key details about a taxonomy element or species, such as the scientific name, common name, when it was discovered, level, different comments, and another pretty cool feature is I can configure additional external identifiers. So in this case, what we have is an identifier that's a direct link to the Integrated Taxonomic Service, the ITIS. And just by entering a valid ITIS TSN right here, I'm creating a link that I can just follow and actually jump to the standard ITIS report page right from within samples, which really is another cool benefit of having a cloud software that's just using a web browser. So within here, I have all the information I could possibly ever need. And as said, you could use other systems as backup sources or additional detail for your taxonomy elements.
Okay, thanks Max. So that was an example of a habitat survey. In a similar vein, I know that in this system we have another kind of survey which was based on electrofishing data. Can you show us that?
Sure. Let's start with a fresh list of filters, and I'm going to show you a slightly different way of getting to this data other than starting from the filters. So in this case, I might know that there was a specific field trip that was for the whole purpose of doing electrofishing data. So I'm going to navigate to my field data section within the main menu. I'm going to open the field trips, and within here I'm going to see a whole bunch of different field trips that produce all my existing data and some plant ones. We'll look into that in a little bit. Right here I can see one trip about electrofishing, so I'm going to open this one. And this field trip page is going to give me a real quick overview about the different crew that went, the individual visits, meaning that the stops on the way. You can see this data is done. You can see a bit of an overview and summary of what types of data have been collected. Additionally, there could be attachments in the change history. But let's look into one of those visits in detail. I'm going to navigate to this location and bring up the visit that has my field survey data, which I can see right here, two different passes of electrofishing data.
So that's kind of interesting. So if I'm looking at this screen, I can see that on the left we've got some samples that were taken. We looked at those earlier, like bottles and so on, sent to a labs. And we've got some field results on the right that were things that were collected in the field, measurements made directly. But this field survey in the middle is kind of interesting. Can you go into more detail on what those are?
Right. Before I do that, as you mentioned, there's different data types within this visit. And I think it's important to point out what ties those different data types together in this visit. It's the system doing that for you. You don't have to match up data by IDs, by date times, by locations. This data is part of this visit, so you could be doing sampling field work with different timestamps, or you could be doing field surveys, field results, and even vertical profiles. All that data is part of this visit, and that's really a concept that's built into AQUARIUS samples. So it really helps if later on you're trying to dig into different types of data and what was going on in the field at that specific time. But let's look into the field surveys a little bit. So I'm going to open up one of those electrofishing field survey data types, and let's speak a little bit about what is a field survey within AQUARIUS samples. So it's meant for data that's really more complex than, let's say, a simple pH reading from a field meter. It's tied to a taxonomy. It's about a specific species, and it's really a combination of that species and additional results, observations describing that species. So it's really grouping multiple observations about one single entity, which could be a fish you collected, specific species or vegetation you're looking at. So all the data is in one place and it's related. So what could one specimen mean? Let's look at this data in a bit more detail. So one specimen could either be a count of fish. Here's one example. I'm going to open this up, and this represents a count of bluegill and even some additional information. Somebody apparently uploaded some pictures, so let's go follow that. I can navigate back to my visit and then look at my attachments. Oh, here's a lot of pictures about the fieldwork that was ongoing. I'm going to download this bluegill picture and just to see what's going on. Oh yeah, that's a good one. So that's really easy to get to related metadata to your field surveys, as you can see. Let's continue looking at specimens that are part of a field survey. As we said, a specimen could either be a count or it could also be describing one individual specimen. Let's look at one of these, which are individual specimens of green sunfish in this case. So I'm going to look at one of those, and we can see here somebody describes an individual sunfish by types of anomalies, about lesions, tumors, deformities. And by the way, all of those are fully configurable to whatever your organization needs. Okay, I'm just going to navigate back to my field survey right here.
Now, Max, stop right there for a second. I noticed when you were looking at some of those results that the results themselves are non-numeric. They're words like yes and no or color. I think that's a pretty important point.
Right, exactly. So AQUARIUS samples can store both numeric and what we call categorical or non-numeric results. So we've already seen a few examples here, as you said. Here's some yes-no results, could be presence, absence. Or if I go back to my visit, I think we had some, yeah, right here, something like water visibility could be good, bad. So that really allows you to capture a much wider range of data than just numbers.
Okay, great. So with these field surveys, can you show us some of the other ways you can explore this data in samples?
Right, totally. So let's go back to my list of observations. And yeah, as you've mentioned, like I've stored those field surveys within samples, and that's all cool. But how can I make this data accessible? How can I use it? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to find that location that we just used for this example. And I'm going to look into abundance, fish abundance in this case. And let's stay with the same example that we already had. I'm going to pick the taxonomy element, which is another filter in samples that will bring up all the data related to that taxonomy element that you have. And I'm going to look for bluegill, since that was part of our example. Here we go. That's the data that we've just been looking at. And I'm actually going to add a little bit more data from one of our demo sites I happen to know that has more of this. So yeah, what can I do with this data now? And I think the obvious selection is just throw it into a chart. So this way I can get, without any manual work, I can get a real quick visual representation of the abundance of a specific species over time across different locations. So that really makes that data very accessible and allows you to drill into it without going into spreadsheets and manually having to work with it.
That's really helpful. Thanks, Max. So let's start to wrap up here for a second. If we zoom out a bit, we'll see the field trips and so on. And I noticed there was some ones that you showed us planned. Can we talk about the planning aspects of Aquarius samples?
Yeah, totally. That's another really important part. So again, this is within our field data section. I'm going to go here and I'm going to go to my field trips again. So we've already skipped across this a little bit, and here we've seen a lot of completed trips in the past. A lot of those actually produce the data for examples that we've been looking at before. Here's one that's special in this case. Here's one that's planned. Let's look at the planned one. So the planned one also has field visits in it, but in this case, yeah, they're planned since it's a planned trip. So let's look at what makes up a planned visit. I can open that up and look into all the detailed parts. So you can see the planned visit actually looks a little bit different than the one that's already started. Since in this case, I think to me it represents a bit of a to-do list. It shows me both the person setting up the monitoring program, what needs to be done, all the related comments they want to make to really hint at the field stuff, what they need to do. And in this case, we can see here's my planned sampling field work. In this case, there's only one sampling template that's planned. A sampling template is a predefined sample which consists of the set of individual bottles and all the lab analysis, including things like holding times and whatnot. So you can predefine all of that within samples and then just use them to plan out your field work, which really speeds up the planning part. We can see you could also plan field surveys or vertical profiles, but this example just has a couple of more field results planned. In this case, pH, water temp, with a couple of additional information about the specific device to be used, some instructions about let the temperature stabilize first, whatever you want to ensure that your standard operating procedures in the field are being maintained.
That concludes our third video in the Aquarius Sample series. We'll be back again with another example. Until then, thanks for watching. See you later.
Thanks for watching.